All right, let's dive right into this explainer and trace what is honestly a fascinating pendulum swing of history. We're looking at a story that just constantly oscillates between deep, fragmented division on one hand and powerful, world altering unity on the other. We're going to take over 2 millennia of German history and break it down into a clear, visual journey to bring this whole complex narrative right to your screen.
Now, when you really think about it, the core question here is absolutely wild. How do you actually get from a scattered group of Iron Age cultures separated by thick forests all the way to the modern industrial and economic titan of Europe? It's crazy to think that a region once considered the quote-unquote barbarian edge of the map became the absolute economic engine of a continent. What were the forces pushing these people together and violently pulling them apart?
So, to make sense of over 2,000 years of shifting borders and regimes, we structured this explainer across 6 distinct eras, starting with the tribes and the Roman frontier, through the Holy Roman Empire, into the Reformation, the forging of a unified state, the World Wars, and finally, modern reunification.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning. Section 1, Tribes and the Roman Frontier, the Collision of Two Worlds. This early era is really a story about two vastly different societies separated by a massive natural river barrier. Picture this. To the south and west, you have the centralized urban Roman Empire. And right across the Rhine and Danube rivers, you've got decentralized pagan Germanic tribes. Now, they definitely traded. Roman pottery and plows absolutely made their way north, but the Germanic people fiercely held on to their distinct way of life, led by warrior elites worshiping gods like Odin and Thor. But things don't stay still forever. Everything changed in the late 4th century with this massive chaotic domino effect known as the migration period. Hunnish invasions from the east aggressively pushed these Germanic tribes westward, and this immense pressure literally shattered the Western Roman Empire, culminating in the sack of Rome in 410 AD. Out of all this chaos, a new order finally emerged, when Frankish kings stepped in to unite the newly settled Western tribes.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Holy Roman Empire, a vast feudal puzzle.
The crucial thing to understand here is that early tribal unification, it really didn't last in a centralized way, though the concept of a united empire was briefly resurrected by Charlemagne. As a Frankish king, he forcefully brought various tribes together and was crowned Emperor of the Romans by the Pope on Christmas Day 800 AD. It was a highly symbolic act that laid the ideological groundwork for an empire that would, in one form or another, stick around for 1,000 years.
But let's be clear, this empire was never a centralized nation-state, not at all. It was this highly fragmented, vast feudal conglomeration. Power was constantly shifting away from the emperor down to countless regional princes. It was so incredibly decentralized that centuries later, the French philosopher Voltaire famously quipped, "It was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire." It was held together way more by a shared imperial ideal than by actual unified governance.
But here's the really fascinating paradox. Despite this absolute political disunity, the German people were actually weaving together a highly shared cultural and economic identity. You've got linguistic ties, magnificent Gothic cathedrals rising up in places like Cologne, major universities like Heidelberg opening their doors in 1386, and the Hanseatic League turning the northern coasts into a massive economic engine. So culturally, they were united, even if politically they were a total puzzle. Moving right along to Section 3, Reformation and Rivalries, the Great Rifts. Just as the empire saw a bit of political consolidation in the 16th century, a monumental rift fractured the lands once again, and technology fueled the whole thing. In 1440, Johannes Gutenberg invents the printing press in Mainz, which is a massive catalyst. So when Martin Luther circulates his 95 Theses in 1517, that printing press allows his Protestant ideas to just spread like wildfire. As a result, northern German princes rebelled against the Catholic Habsburg emperors, literally cleaving the empire entirely in half. 4.5 to 8 million. Let that sink in for a second. That is the staggeringly tragic number of estimated fatalities from battle, famine, and disease during the ensuing 30 Years' War. To put that into perspective, some regions lost over half of their entire population. It was this vicious religious and political civil war that completely decimated the populace and reinforced the decentralized nature of the empire in the most brutal way imaginable. And from the ashes of that conflict, a bitter rivalry emerged. On one side, you have the sprawling, multi-ethnic realm of Habsburg Austria operating out of Vienna. On the other, the rising, highly modernized military powerhouse of Hohenzollern-Prussia, based up in Berlin. These two absolute titans would wrestle for control of the German destiny for decades to come.
That perfectly sets the stage for Section 4, Forging a Unified Empire. Blood and Iron.
Now, following the shockwaves of the French Revolution and Napoleon's conquests, the pendulum swings violently back towards unity. Enter Otto von Bismarck, the Prussian minister-president. Bismarck masterfully used a rapid sequence of aggressive wars to unify the states under Prussian dominance. He defeated Denmark, completely sidelined Austria at Königgrätz, and captured Napoleon III of France. By 1871, a unified German empire was officially proclaimed, right inside the Palace of Versailles, no less.
And this right here is where we see the birth of the German industrial powerhouse we'd recognize today. Armed with vast coal and iron resources and a highly educated public, Germany industrialized at breakneck speed. By 1900, it was rivaling Britain and the US. It fostered incredible scientific minds like Einstein and Planck. And under Bismarck, even pioneered modern social welfare. Think state-backed pensions and health insurance. It was a true titan. But, Bismarck's carefully crafted diplomatic balance in Europe just didn't last. In 1890, an ambitious young Kaiser Wilhelm II dismisses Bismarck and completely abandons all that diplomatic restraint. He aggressively pushed a nationalistic foreign policy, building up a massive navy and hunting for global colonies. This aggressive posture effectively turned the entire European continent into a heavily armed powder keg.
Which unfortunately leads us into Section 5, World Wars and Division. The catastrophic overreach. We now enter the darkest, most destructive phase of this history.
2 million. Over 2 million German soldiers were dead by November 1918, following the spark that ignited the First World War. The imperial government totally collapsed under the weight of the stalemate, and the highly punitive Treaty of Versailles left the newly formed democratic Weimar Republic humiliated, carrying massive debts and basically teetering on the edge of complete societal collapse. The source material clearly outlines how radical right-wing forces exploited this immense economic misery. By 1933, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party had established a repressive totalitarian dictatorship. This regime was defined by extreme militarism, aggressive territorial expansion, and the horrific, systematic genocide of Jews and others in the Holocaust. This trajectory drove Europe directly into the catastrophic Second World War, ending in 1945 with Germany surrendering in total absolute ruins.
The unified state ceased to exist entirely. It was carved up by the victorious powers and split right down the middle by the Iron Curtain. In the West, you had a liberal, democratic, capitalist state rebuilding through free markets. In the East, a Soviet satellite state operating as a repressive one-party dictatorship, burdened by a centrally planned economy. Two entirely different worlds, literally walled off from one another.
Finally, we reach Section 6, Reunification and Modernity, Reconnecting the Nation. Let's look at how this fractured land came back together.
For decades, that division felt completely permanent, but a stunning, peaceful revolution was brewing. By the 1980s, the East German economy was heavily stagnating, and simmering dissatisfaction finally boiled over into massive, peaceful protests in 1989. This intense public pressure overwhelmed the regime, leading to the joyous and iconic fall of the Berlin Wall in November of that year, formally paving the way for full reunification in 1990. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought. How exactly does a nation reinvent itself so profoundly? Germany's incredibly turbulent journey, from scattered Iron Age tribes to an industrialized empire, through unimaginable tragedies and deep Cold War divisions, all the way to a united democratic powerhouse, remains one of the most defining threads in all of Europe's story. It truly shows the resilience of a people constantly negotiating the space between fracture and unity.